And a good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's CoSIDA Capital One listening and leading webinar on how to work successfully from home. I'm Nick Guerriero, the chair of the Continuing Ed Department from George Washington University. We appreciate you joining us today in these difficult and uncharted times, and we thank you for being here on our webinar. Before we begin, we'd like to say hello and a quick thank you to our corporate partner, Capital One, which is a presenting sponsor of our Continuing Ed series. As a reminder, these webinars will be posted later on CoSIDA.com, CoSIDA Connect, which is our membership online community. This will also be put into a podcast form, so you can check CoSIDA.com for this webinar and our CoSIDA YouTube channel. Please start submitting your questions. We'd love to hear from you and what's on your mind. Please use the chat box, which is kind of right on the right-hand side of your computer. We'll save some time at the end of our webinar to get your questions out there. Hey, if you have a suggestion, give us your suggestions as well. We're going to try something new today, so tell us who you are, what your suggestion is about working from home, and we'll let everybody know about it. But let's get quickly started with our webinar. And our presenters today are our CoSIDA staff members, and Beau White is the Director of Creative Services, and Lori Bolig is the Director of Membership Engagement, and Doug Vance is the Executive Director. Barb Kowal is the Director of Professional Development and External Affairs, and Will Roleson is our Associate Executive Director. And we're going to get it started off with our Executive Director, Doug Vance. And Doug, just talk a little bit about, first of all, why we're here today. We had a webinar last week, a town hall, talking about everything from convention to academic All-America. And now we're here talking about your experiences about working from home. So take us through it. As a CoSIDA staff, you guys don't really have a home office, so you guys work from your home offices on a daily basis. What's it like working from home?
Well, thanks, Nick. When we decided to stage this particular webinar, as we looked at it, we felt like that, hey, we've done this for many years. It's a natural part of our existence. So we wanted just to kind of have a webinar and offer some direction and advice based on our experiences. Our experiences may not fit everybody's. Our situations are definitely can be different. This is a permanent situation for us. And the thing I want to stress today, in somewhat of an encouraging piece of advice, is don't forget this is a temporary situation for you. You're going to get past this reality at some point. But you've got to embrace the aspect of that. You've got this. You'll figure it out. Office chairs and meeting rooms all across the country are empty right now. You're not alone in this situation. So embrace the challenge, understand what it is. And today we're just going to talk about some of the fundamentals. What's in play, how it affects you mentally, how it affects your work output, all those issues that are in play here in working remotely. Nick?
Now, Doug, obviously, from a CoSIDA standpoint, we can see you have a home office and such, but a lot of us are used to sitting at a cubicle or at an office where we've got pictures on the walls. What are some things maybe that you've done to make yourself feel more at home, but more in an office setting?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do to enhance your situation. There's a lot of statistics out there that say working remotely enhances productivity. But I think one of the critical things is discipline and having a dedicated workspace. Now I realize that's not possible for everyone, but for us who work at home every day, the dedicated workspace helps separate what we're dealing with. It takes away the distractions. You can have a lot of distractions in this situation. But I think the other thing that's in play for many of our members right now is the mental part of it, the whole mental health part of it, how this affects you and how you make this adjustment. There's ways to do it, there's tricks, but there's certainly, I think that's a real big key.
One of the things that I think for some of us younger SIDs are just used to being able to talking with our peers, someone who you go to the water cooler with, or you grab a cup of coffee with. What do you, as the leader of our organization, do to kind of keep up with everyone in your staff? I know Lori's going to talk a little bit later about some of those apps, but how do you guys stay current with each other? What happened in the ball game yesterday? What happened on Dancing with the Stars?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about all the tools that are out there from instant messaging and such, how you stay connected. But as a staff, once this upside down world happened for us all, we all decided we're going to communicate more frequently. So you normally have one staff meeting a week when we're on GoToMeeting. We're all face to face, and we try to make that a very open situation. We all can contribute. We can all talk. We try to keep things also personal. It's not just all work. It's understanding the things that are impacting all of our staff members. We try to stay on top of that. But it's just about communicating. You just want to ration the distractions that you're dealing with from home. And but I'm fortunate. I have a staff that stays on top of what's going on in our world. They stay in touch with people, with members. They follow what's happening on social media, as I try to do. So it's important us to understand what's in play out there with our members and react to that and help deal with it.
Let me ask you this question. Who's the first person to send you a text message about Tiger King? Because everyone's been binge watching it, I feel.
I tell you what, I just subscribed to Netflix once this happened. My wife and I did, and we watched our first episode of Ozark last night. So I'm just getting into it, just finding out what Tiger King's all about. Haven't watched it yet, but nobody sent me a text on that yet.
Thanks, Doug. We'll bring in Will Roleson now to talk a little bit about blogging. And Will, you've done a great job on CoSIDA.com putting together some thoughts. Talk a little bit about some of your key points from your blog, and really what that does to help our members.
Sure. Yeah, I wrote a blog, appeared on CoSIDA.com about a month and a half ago. Little did I know at the time how pertinent it would become in such a very short time. And again, it's just one person's experience and expounding upon how we use different systems for communication as a staff. Doug mentioned a moment ago just how important communication is, and lots of it. I really don't think you can communicate too much in a remote setting. But working from home, as I mentioned, is not for everybody. The lead of my piece was that when I tell people that I work from home, they either say, wow, I wish I could do that, or I could never do that. It really never falls in the middle. But we as staff got to choose to do this. We knew when we interviewed and ultimately got our current positions that CoSIDA was going to be a home-based operation. You didn't quite have that luxury out there as SIDs, athletic staff, and really a lot of people in our country now. You were forced to do so, and at a moment's notice, and maybe even more so for those in athletics, from going 90 miles an hour, 60 plus hours a week, to a very different home-based setting. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you sometimes I wish I could go into an office just to break things up and do something a little differently. I will also say to take advantage of this opportunity. Again, the reason we're in here is obviously unimaginable, to say the least, but make sure to step away for lunch with your spouse or significant other or family if you have an opportunity. Take a break and go outside for a walk or run. But really take advantage of the opportunities that you have now. Again, we're fortunate. We set up our offices. We make sure we have comfortable chairs. Those out here may have a makeshift office and you're sitting on a hard wooden chair at your kitchen or dining room table. So a much different setting. But make yourself as comfortable as possible. If you're going to be sitting a lot, you need to be comfortable, or you need to get up and move about and things like that. So I know we as staff appreciate the opportunity to work from home. I'm in my 9th year doing this. Barb on our staff has been doing it even longer than that. So we're here to answer any questions and try to make your experiences as good as it can be, even though, as Doug mentioned earlier, it's a temporary and hopefully shorter rather than longer situation for each of you.
Now, in the old world, and I don't like using it in that context, but when you'd work from home, your kids would be at school, or your wife or significant other would be at their job. Well, now everyone's home. So how are you dealing with being able to do your job, maybe having to be a substitute teacher for homeschooling, having to worry about other people when it used to be Will would have control of the house for those work hours?
Sure. I would actually love to hear from what maybe some of our attendees can speak to that today and share some best practices. My three boys, I have two in college. They were both commuting, so they were both home on a regular basis anyway. And my youngest is a junior, in high school, so they're very self-sufficient. The older two, of course, in college are now doing remote learning. My youngest will start e-learning at his high school, from his high school. From a home-based setting here in a couple weeks. I can't imagine those people who are out there that have, elementary or preschool age kids who, need to have some instruction or hands-on assistance to do homework or to do learning, whether it's computer-based or, flashcards or whatever. So I won't try to tell anybody how to do that. That certainly adds another level to the responsibility that someone may have and may keep you from sitting at your desk or doing work as much as you might otherwise like to.
You talk about working from your desk, and I think you mentioned this, being able to go out and have lunch with someone. What's a typical day for you guys, like for you specifically? Are you glued to the chair? Are you someone who likes to move around when you're thinking? We see in office settings, people will sit at their desks, or they'll go out and have lunch every once in a while. But what is the appropriate way of working from home?
You definitely need to get up and move about. I mean, I certainly go down to my kitchen, and when it's time for lunch, I make sure not to eat at my desk unless a webinar or another online meeting forces me to be at my computer over the noon hour here in the Eastern time zone. But I usually start my morning first. Every morning kind of routine is to check CoSIDA's financials, pay bills, issue invoices, things like that. And beyond that, schedule out the day with whatever it holds in terms of meetings or other obligations. I have a couple of dogs. If you can see the floor next to me, my two blue pit bulls are asleep on the floor. And, I get out to take them for a walk a couple times a day, which is, requires me to get up out of my seat, go outside, hopefully get some fresh air, weather permitting. And make sure I'm, not on too late, after a 5 o'clock time, usually when we're in the midst, probably the next month or so, or in a usual spring when I would be preparing for a convention, there might be some late nights, as there would be for all of our staff, but, try to keep that between an 8 to 5 time frame as much as possible.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate your time. We'll have Barb Kowal come on right now, and Barb, you and I are going to chat a little bit about routine and having some discipline. And you and I have had some great conversations over the last week or so about just how to live your life right now. Talk to us a little bit about some of those things, being in good habits. I think we've made the joke about taking a shower, wearing work attire, don't sit in your pajamas all the time. But what are some good things about working from home that can make you still feel that you're in an office setting?
Right. Thanks. Thank you, Nick, for this. And obviously, thank you for hosting our webinars on this. If I can call your attention to the screen where everyone has to give themselves permission to be a little bit anxious of working at home. When you look at the stat that only less than 6% of American employees a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, work from home. This is brand new territory for most people. And, the one thing that I'm going to talk a little bit about, because I struggle with it very much, I love to be in the know. I love to bounce projects back and forth, but being distracted and having temptations is the first rule of thumb if you're going to be successful at working at home. You need to alleviate those distractions. Doug talked a little bit about it. Will hinted at some of those as well. We know that you miss the creativity and socializing, ideas, collaboration in a workplace. And there are more distractions at home. You know, you can easily do the laundry. Maybe you can go and watch a Netflix show. You know, maybe you're tempted to go online and play a video game. But you know what? The one thing is that I found, and that we found over a little bit of time, is that when we all came from work environments where we were in offices, but now that we're remote, the one thing that we find is without the interruption of a staff member, a coach, a student athlete popping in and out, it's something I listed on the screen that says content switching. All those interruptions have you switch your context back and forth, and it's hard to get centered again. So the one good thing is you can be a little bit more productive by being at home and following some, you know, routine. And it's really, really hard to train yourself how to stay productive in a home environment if you're not used to doing that. And the one thing that I would emphasize for everyone is, you know, you might have to take a look in the mirror and say, how can I be a little bit more disciplined? And one way is you've got to set routines. You know, what is your morning routine? Has it always been to make breakfast and step out? Has it been to stop at, you know, Dunkin' Donuts or whatever, grab a coffee and go to work? Well, if that's the case, replicate that in your home environment. You know, make that dedicated workspace. Have that morning routine, and organize lunch and snacks. There's one thing that, you know, everybody's stressed right now. Everybody has amazing concerns about what's happening. But think about some of the things that we've talked about and that, you know, a healthy lifestyle helps you through these times. You don't want to do tremendous amount of carb loading or snacking all the time. You know, think about healthy snacks. Think about getting up out of that chair. And I've listed a lot of things about, you know, set a timer. You know, work 45 minutes and take a break. No one was meant to be sedentary. And that's the one thing that we struggle with sometimes, getting locked in and being too sedentary. So I just provided a lot of tips. You know, there's some time tracking apps that you might do. It just set your phone's app and go from there. But the most important thing is understand when you see limitation, I mean, when you see distractions coming, stop yourself from getting distracted. Nick?
Yeah, Barb, I think those are some great points here, and even just reading, you know, some of the lists you've put on there, and ways to self-educate yourself. Obviously, listening to our podcast, folks are taking some time out of their day. You know, if you're working on a project, you know, don't feel that you can't surf Twitter to see what other schools are doing. That's a good way to learn. And you know, there's even you know, there's LinkedIn Learning if you want to learn a new skill, which is what we'll talk about a little bit later. But how do you, when we stay productive and you know, we're trying to talk with other colleagues, you know, how do you do that while also staying on task with your work? You may get a phone call from another SID, or you may get a call from, you know, one of your vendors. How do you stay on task so that you're not having, you know, what would be a happy hour call, a conversation, but a business call?
Right. And I think that's one thing that's always going to happen, whether you're at home or especially when you're in the office. You are going to have those interruptions, and those are important interruptions. Taking a phone call from a committee chair is really important to me. Answering an email from someone who might be struggling online to do a scholarship application, that's important. So if you can limit your personal disruptions, limit your personal distractions, then when you do have those quote unquote office interruptions for important tasks, then you won't be so flustered and you'll be able to get back on track easily. So, you know, this is not a cut and dry thing. You can't say, you know what, kids, I'm going to close my door and, you know, for the next 3 hours, I'm going to be working and do not interrupt. Do not come in this room. That's unrealistic. But if you can actually set up a routine for yourself, which again might require more discipline than if you're in an office setting, you will limit your own personal distractions so that when you are called away for a phone call, or your boss might say, hey, I'd love to have a Zoom check-in in 30 minutes, you're not going to be totally flustered and frustrated. So it all starts with the personal and being a little bit more discipline. I keep using that word because that is one of the, you know, limit your distractions, limit your temptations, and then you won't feel so scattershot.
Thanks, Barb, for your insight on how to stay productive. And it's funny, you and I talk a lot about this, and I think it's definitely very important to make sure that you do stay on task, but also at the same point, checking in on people and making sure that you still treat your your office, your home life, like you would treat your office life by talking with your colleagues and friends, and making them part of your daily routine.
Absolutely. You want to check in with your colleagues for work-related issues. You don't want to work in a vacuum, like I mentioned on my sheet. You also want to socialize with folks, and that's so important that you continue that. And everybody works in different ways. Everyone has an ability to, some people are extroverts, some people are introverts. Some people need that social interaction more than others. That's something that is really hard to work on being at home, but reach out to friends, reach out to your colleagues, not just for work-related subjects, but for socialization. I know that our Zoom chats, our CoSIDA coffee shops have been really popular. People just need that outlet. I know people are doing it on their own. CoSIDA colleagues are getting together and chatting at night. So it's obvious that we need that social connection as well. And that's important. Just don't forget about that. The other thing I want to say is, when you do have meetings, it doesn't matter if you're the senior staff member or the junior staff member. Be active and be heard. Make sure that you are verbal, or that you follow up with emails, just as a check-in to let people know that you're contributing to the team's effort.
Cool. Thanks, Barb. And Beau, now we'll talk a little bit about physical aspects of an office, and how you can be a little more efficient and comfortable. Obviously, in a creative side that you work for within CoSIDA, what are some of the things that you're doing to stay active and
Thanks, Chris, or Nick. They asked me to talk about my office setup because I'm the most vocal about it. To me, the most important thing is to create yourself a comfortable working space. I have worked from home at least part-time for about 9 years now. And one thing that is definitely true for me is it's hard to get up from the desk, because there's always one more thing you can get done. Oh, I can do this, and then I can have lunch, and then you do 3 things, and next thing you know, it's 2 in the afternoon. So I have taken some steps to make myself a little more comfortable and active in my workspace. The things I put on the screen here, just pay attention to your ergonomics and your posture. You don't want to, when you get old, have sciatic pain and everything else from sitting in a chair all day. And that's really what happens when you work from home, because you don't have somebody coming in your office saying, hey, let's go for a walk around the arena, or you don't get up and go to lunch because your kitchen is 10 feet away. So you got to have comfortable places to sit. I would also suggest to switch things up. Stand sometimes, maybe sit outside, go out on your deck if you're able to, or your porch. I think that's still allowed. We can go out on our porch, but switch things up. Try to get some natural light. I have a window right here next to me. And those things are important to keep yourself from going crazy. The other thing I wanted to say is consider the technology when you're setting things up around your house. If you're on Wi-Fi, you need to be close to the router. There's a big difference between sending emails and surfing the internet and being on a Zoom call. And a lot of people are learning about these Zoom calls. Our staff, we're used to them, but a lot of people are just doing them for the first time in the last few weeks. You want that experience to be good for yourself and for the people on the other end. So I always wear headphones. Every call is better with headphones. My wife, she's a speech therapist. She's down in the basement right now doing sessions. We went and bought her a pair of headphones, and her sessions are much more enjoyable for her and the people she's doing that with. My next slide here, this is a picture I just kind of took of my office this morning. So 95% of the time, I am either standing at my desk, leaning on that stool, or I am sitting on this exercise ball. I don't actually have a real office chair, and I have found that to be much better in the long term for my back, my feet, my legs. So consider that when you're thinking, if you've got a kitchen counter, maybe you want to just stand in there for an hour. And exercise balls aren't very expensive. And my desk, you can see a little button there on the right. It's got a button where I can make the desk go up and down. Now, you're not going to do that for just working at home for a month, but you can switch it up, sit at your coffee table on an exercise ball, or stand at your kitchen counter, whatever you can do to kind of switch it up and not get in that same position all day long. The last thing that I was going to touch on, and we've gotten a few questions in the chat, and Nick, you asked Will a little bit about this, but I have 2 middle schoolers working on school in the other room right now. And as I mentioned, my wife's down doing speech therapy. So I am CoSIDA Director of Creative Services. I'm Assistant Lunch Lady. I am 6th and 8th grade teacher or principal. There's a lot of things going on right now, and it can be stressful for people who aren't used to it. When my kids were younger, like I said, I've been working from home at least part-time for about 8 or 9 years. My youngest, he was about 3. So, I had days at home with him where I was trying to work, and it can be challenging. What I put on the screen here is really what I believe is the first thing is to have some grace with your spouse and kids. You're going to get irritated with people that you're around more than you're used to, but you have to remember that these are the people that you love, and you want to take a step back and realize that not everything they're not going to be perfect, and you're not going to be perfect. When it comes to my kids' school, like I said, they're doing online learning, like I'm sure some of your kids are. I say treat them the way you would hope your boss would treat you. Give them some expectations and some responsibilities. Before this call started, I announced to them, I have something that I'm going to be on for the next 45 minutes to an hour. Here's what you should do during that time. And then I'll see you then, and we can talk about it if we need to. Give them the freedom to get done what they need done, especially if your kids are as old as mine. They know what they need to do, so they don't need you checking on them every 10 minutes. Give them the jobs, tell them to do it, and give them the chance to do it. At the same time, one of my sons, he had assignments from, I think it was 5 different classes. Just like I was talking about when I started, he doesn't need to sit in a chair for 5 or 6 hours straight either. So encourage breaks. Have lunch with your family if you can. Talk to them. Remember that they're not getting that social time that they would normally get at lunch or recess or whatever at school, and they need that. You can't go bunker in your room for 3 hours and get mad every time they walk in. My family knows if my door is closed, that means I'm on something like this webinar, and it's not appropriate to distract me. But otherwise, if my door is open, which it is most of the time, they're welcome to come in, and I'll stop and we'll talk about what problem they're having. As soon as this gets done, I got to figure out how to scan my son's math homework in color, because that's what his teacher requires. The last thing I wanted to say was, show appreciation for the extra effort everyone in your house is putting forward. My wife, she's working twice as hard as she normally does when she goes into the office, and she's stressed, but she still gets our groceries purchased. We work together to make sure our kids have lunch and snacks, and a thank you, a recognition of the fact that people are going above and beyond what they normally do, I think is really appreciated. Nick?
So I got to ask the question, what was on the lunch menu today?
Well, as I was saying that, I live in Colorado, so it's lunchtime right now. So as soon as we can get this over with, we can get in there and have lunch.
Sloppy Joe still on the old?
Well, Sloppy Joe's, that square pizza that they used to have. Maybe we'll have that. We had that yesterday.
So one of the things that, and you made a great point about technology, and this is something that popped in my mind. What would have happened if this pandemic happened 15 years ago? where there wasn't social media, where there wasn't, high-speed internet, how would and this is just me just thinking of it as we're going along, but like, how would our industry, especially from what you do from a creative side, how would we survive?
That's a huge question you just asked. Looks like Lori has a thought.
And it's something that literally just popped in my head, but honestly, like, I think,
Yeah.
and I do remember from hearing stories, from one of my old bosses that at one of the CoSIDAs, it was, hey guys, the internet's coming. You need to get with the times. I think
I
wasn't
can
it like
think back to
Bill
the
Little
people
said
I
that from
worked.
Texas?
I can think back to the people I worked with at that time, and I know for a fact we would have been well connected on the phone, text messaging. You said 15 years ago, I believe we had that then. I think it would have been a whole different experience. But Lori, what do you think?
Well, that was one of the things I was going to say when I did come on next or whenever, and I'm going to talk really slow so Beau's lunch hour is delayed as much as it can possibly be delayed. So I have worked for 2 organizations from home, and 15 years ago, I worked for a consulting company at home. And Beau, to answer your question, I got my first text message ever while working at that company. So it was just beginning to be a way of connecting. But other than that, we emailed each other. We did not have Zoom. We didn't, maybe GoTo existed, but that was not the way we held our meetings. If I wanted to communicate with the coworkers 15 years ago from home, I emailed them or I called them from a phone. I got my first smartphone, I think, when 15 years ago, maybe. Now, certainly wasn't as smart as these phones are today, but yeah, it was a completely different thing. So I just want to pop in and say that.
No, but I do think it's interesting, and it's important that, for all the work that all of the SIDs are doing, we're in a world right now that allows us to do what we're doing. And if we were in, different times, it would be tougher to do. But I think, like you said, Beau, just, being able to do different things and setting times and expectations, I think is super important. I think it'd be interesting to see once we go back to our office lives, if some of these things that we've learned we take with us.
I agree, Nick. Time will tell how people re-enter their form or their old normal. Everybody keeps calling this the new normal. It's the current normal. I don't think it will be the long-term normal, but things will change, and we'll see what things that we're coming up with now, what will outlast this virus and this situation that we're in. We're probably getting some good ideas now that we'll use for years to come.
Thanks, Beau. Appreciate that. Lori, time for you to talk a little bit about how you communicate with your teams, your coaches, your staffs, your student athletes, and your supervisors.
Sure. Thanks, Nick. So I'm not going to be telling you guys anything that you don't already know. There is a slide up now that just talks about all these tools that we use. We just, oh gosh, I don't know, probably about a year and a half ago, moved to Slack as our instant messaging tool for staff. It's free. You can set up all different kinds of channels. We have a random channel where we just go post stories or comments. We have an association management channel, which we post ideas for how to manage our association. And then we have, just a general channel where we put all of our discussion throughout the day. We have moved to a project management tool called Trello. It also has free access. So many other, we're doing this Zoom. We're doing a lot more Zooms. We have GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. So, all these things here you can see as potential ways to communicate with your staff, manage documents, manage your team, manage your projects. And one thing I think is really important about these tools right now is that I don't go on Twitter ever that I don't see something from the people who own Slack or Trello or Zoom talking about their free webinars for how to learn how to use these tools. So I think it's it's really important to become familiar with them so that when somebody does say, hey, let's have a Zoom meeting, you know where to find, how to silence your microphone, or how to turn your camera on or off, or how to have a chat with the whole group, or just specific groups during the webinar. But there are a couple of things that I think we've all learned, and I certainly, in my 2 times doing this work from home gig, is that there's a real big pitfall to communicating through these tools, and that is that you don't really, we've all known this by text messaging especially, you don't hear a voice inflection, or you don't see a facial expression. And so those things together really, basically, they leave it up to us to interpret the tone that someone is using to deliver a message. There's not a filter for gratitude or sarcasm or wittiness. You don't always know if somebody has hurt feelings when they're responding to you, or if they're angry, and we're sort of left to interpret that on our own. So just, some solutions here. Pick up the phone, call that person. I don't always understand Beau's comments sometimes, or Barb's, and if I think that I'm misinterpreting, I call them up and I say, hey, I don't get what you're saying right here. Are you mad at me? Do you need me to do something? So don't leave it to chance, right? I would say to err on the side of people are pretty much positive, but if there's something that you don't understand, or that you don't think you're interpreting quite right, call up your coworker and ask them if you understand what they're saying. Always use your best manners when you're sending things to coworkers or colleagues, because these tools, very similar to email, when you reply all and you only mean to reply to one person, you can really get caught by saying something inappropriate about one of your coworkers or somebody that you work with. So, and then on the next page, oh no, there it is. Etiquette. So Beau talked about headphones. I do the same thing. Limit your distractions. That close your door. People aren't walking behind you. And don't. One thing is, when we don't use headphones, sometimes we forget that every little sound that we hear, our colleagues can hear on the other end too. So don't assume that your coworkers aren't hearing exactly what you're hearing. Mute your line if you're not speaking. Turn off your camera if you're not the person who's if that's the way you set up the call and you're not speaking. Turn off your camera. Turn off your audio. Take turns speaking. A raise of the hand is kind of where we're at now, because we don't want to speak over each other, and let other people speak. So I would just, end by saying that, very similar to you guys, I have my husband's at home working, and I have a college age son who's home doing grad school online. And just exactly like Beau said, my husband works in the travel industry, and it's hugely hit. He's very stressed. My college age son had all the freedom in the world when he was living in an apartment with 3 other guys his age. He's crabby. We've all had to walk away from each other instead of saying something really nasty or hurtful, because we all truly do understand that the situation is not what we wanted, but it's kind of what we got. So please be sure to extend the extra grace to your coworkers and those people that you're sharing office space with. And we're so happy that we know that this for you is not a permanent situation. We like it. We have no problem with it, but we understand that you want to be back on your campuses soon. So take care, and Nick, back to you.
Actually, we're going to stay, you and I, for a couple minutes to have a couple questions that have come through. One question's come in is someone who lives alone, but is a social butterfly. How do they interact with people? And I think there's one way that you and Beau and Will are starting to promote.
Well, I
Coffee
mean,
talk.
I have a book club coming up, Zoom book club on Sunday. So I belong to a book club for like 12 years. And we're not missing. We meet every month, and this will be the first time that we haven't been able to meet in person. and we're going to do it on a Zoom call. So, and I know that, you know, you have peers out there, and if you have the ability to do Zoom or FaceTime, I would make that date with them. Nick?
Yeah, I also think too that, you know, if someone feels isolated, and this was kind of part of the discussion I was going to bring up, is don't feel afraid to make a phone call. You know, I know we talk about having to work our hours and such, but if you have a friend in the industry, networking is exactly, you know, what our time is to be used for as well. You know, call another SID, call an AD, call someone and talk about what they're doing on their campus. I think sometimes hearing another voice may help, you know, even if it's, you know, not an opportunity to be out with them publicly, but just talking to somebody and, you know, interacting that way. I've seen a lot of, you know, a lot of SIDs are doing like Google Hangouts with each other, or brunches or happy hours. So I think if you're someone who, you know, likes to be out and likes to be part of the party, there are ways to do it without having to actually sit at the restaurant. You know,
Right.
I've had a couple, you know, happy hours where, you know, we all say, okay, take out a drink and we sit and chat and we play music, or, you know, we've just found a way with one of the trivia groups that I'm part of that we're doing trivia through Google Hangout. You're
Yeah.
gonna cheat on it somehow, but it's still cool. It's still an awesome opportunity to do it. But I do think these are great ways for folks who, you know, may feel a little bit isolated because they may not have somebody else to talk to, of ways to interact with each other, whether it's 9 to 5 or 5 to 9, the other way around.
Oh, absolutely. You know, you set me up for that, and I kind of failed whenever I didn't mention just actually picking up the phone and calling. But I do like that we have tools now where we can see each other's faces. If you know, if you don't want to be on camera all the time, phone's a great opportunity. I will say also, and you know, I'm not really used to being a nice person, but I have a neighbor who lives by herself, and I'm checking in on her just by text message. And she right now she needs nothing. But I think sometimes to look outside of ourselves and, okay, we're in this situation, we're by ourselves, we're alone, we'd love to talk to somebody. Do I have a neighbor? Do I have a, you know, an older aunt or uncle, or somebody that we can just check on and sort of feel like we're, you know, like maybe we're doing something a little nice for someone else? I think that's also something I would encourage people to do.
Yeah, we're going to take some other questions, and I think this one would be a great time to talk with Beau once again, about, you know, interviews and being creative. You know, if someone's interested in doing an interview, or side by side, what are some options? I know, you know, one of the options that we've worked through with CoSIDA has been a company like Blinder, but what are some of those other options out there? I know we've seen, you know, with Instagram, you can do an Instagram video, but how can you as an SID stay relevant and keep doing those interviews when you may not be able to have the student athlete next to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, there's a lot of tools available to set up interviews, and you know, when I'm scrolling through Twitter or Facebook, I'm seeing some amazing ideas that different offices and individuals are coming up with. If you're having a hard time figuring out how to connect with your coaches or your student athletes, or even like your supervisors, like maybe you want to, maybe your athletic director, you'd like to do something with that person. You mentioned Blinder. That is a tool that, if you're not familiar with Blinder, they've been a great supporter and friend of our organization for some time now. If you've seen our Academical America of the Year interviews this year, we have been using the Blinder technology, and it has just made it infinitely easier on us, because obviously we don't work on the campus with all these winners. And so between me and then Nicole Watson at Chicago, who is on the committee, we get these interviews set up using Blinder's technology, where we can enter the details of 2 people, and then they get text messages or emails, and all they have to do is click basically what amounts to a Zoom link, and they have their interview, and then we get a recording of it, and off we go to create our content. That is one tool. If you're looking for, hopefully, you know, some of your local media or even national media that are still working, but I got to think that at this time, they're looking for stories. This probably is the best time ever to pitch a story. And if you want to set up an interview between a member of the media and one of your student athletes, but you're not really interested in giving out phone numbers, this product is for you. They have plans for large offices and small offices alike. So I don't think it's cost prohibitive. I've seen some smaller schools using it. Paul Smith at Texas Women's University comes to mind. He would be a good resource if you wanted to reach out to him. But also, you know, if you don't want to pay for anything, Zoom will work great. I know of some SIDs that have been setting up Zoom calls with media and student athletes, and that gives you the chance to be on at the same time and can help answer questions if your interviewer needs something from you. So there's options out there, and I think that if you're looking for more ideas, CoSIDA Connect or any of the Facebook groups are great places to reach out and get ideas from people. Nick?
Thanks, Beau. Another way that you can do it as well, this is one of the ways that I like to do it with my men's basketball teams. I'll have the reporter call me, and then I'll three-way and add a call to that student athlete. So the only person who sees the phone number is myself. So a reporter won't get a student athlete's number. They'll have my number, and then I can kind of handle the conversation, jump in when needed if there's an inappropriate question. And I think it makes a student athlete feel comfortable that, you know, you're just adding them to a line and you can stand next to them. You know, they don't have to touch your phone for, you know, they can be on their own phone. They can be sitting in the back of the bus, and or if it's a coach. So that's another option. Another question's come in for Barb, and this is a good one. We talked about how to start your day and what to do in the middle of your day, but hey, Barb, how do you close your day?
Right. And I think thank you, Nick, for that. And thank you for that question. I think that if you start your day with a routine, I think you should create a habit that will signal the close of your workday. It's really, really difficult. And I think everyone on our staff can admit it's really hard to push away from the desk when that desk and that laptop might be 10 feet away from you, might be in your bedroom. It might be in your living room where you're sharing space with others. So, you know, how can you do this? How can you create a habit that signals the close of the workday? I'm going to be the first to admit that I should follow my own lesson here and my own advice. But you know, can you sign off on a business messaging app? You know, do you sign off on Slack if you're using that with your team? They know that you're done. There's some of our staff members that are great at putting a little sleep signal up. Can you signal the end of your day by, you know, taking a walk? Walking your dog, you know, something as simple as shutting down your computer, putting on a favorite podcast. Maybe that's the way that you do it. You know, whatever you choose to do it consistently to mark the end of your working hours. You know, one example is this. Everyone probably has one laptop or one computer. So when your laptop is hooked up to your monitor and your external keyboard, maybe that's your work time. So if it's on your lap, and you take it then, maybe that's your personal time. That's a way to distinguish your one working piece of equipment from work to personal environment. You know, you might want to go as far as, you know, creating a separate, you know, space on your hard drive for your work, and then or on your desktop for work, and then for pleasure. So I think that that's important. And the other thing I want to say, and I think Lori mentioned this, Doug mentioned this, everyone mentioned this. The one thing, if you take another thing away from this webinar, is you can never over communicate enough when you're working remotely. You know, it requires you to over communicate. You know, tell people about your work schedule, tell them about your availability often. If you finish a project, if you finish something on your to-do list, an important task, say so. Tell your supervisor, tell your colleague that you're working with. Over communicating doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to give them a to-do list and a checklist every day, but it does mean repeating yourself and letting people know that you're on task. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Barbara. A couple of great suggestions have come in, and one from Jim Powers talks about having worked from home in the past. One of the things that he's learned is to put together that daily task list. It doesn't need to be long, but just a short list of things to accomplish on a daily basis. And thanks, Jim, for that suggestion. We'll bring back Doug Vance to talk a little bit about being a leader, and I think I kind of brought this up to you in the open, but with CoSIDA not having an actual office where you've got you in one desk and Barb and the rest and everybody else, how do you become a virtual leader when you may not be able to see the person you're leading on a daily basis?
I think one of the big adjustments for me when I started this aspect of working remotely was understanding that working remotely puts a bigger emphasis on trust and accountability. It's really important that you empower people to manage their own time. If you supervise someone and you have concerns about their work habits, you have a lot bigger problems than just the concept of working remotely. As the staff has talked about, the emphasis isn't about keeping office hours necessarily. The final measure should be the scope of delivery, getting work done. Time in the seat is no longer a work metric. You shouldn't be concerned about occupying your desk on a regular routine. That's not the atmosphere it's more of a project delivery. And as someone who has to report to someone, it's important for you to talk about the things you do in this environment. You have to send information out. You have to over communicate, as Barb talked about. I think that's really important to send that message. But if you're in a supervisor role, you got to trust your people to get things done. You shouldn't have to worry that much about what they're getting done. Their work output will demonstrate what they're achieving.
I've had some conversations with some other SIDs through this, because obviously for a lot of us this is brand new, and a lot of us haven't had the opportunity or had a reason to work from home. Some of the comments that I've got is that it's challenging because you don't get to have that physical conversation, where you're sitting in an office together and they're sitting at a chair next to your desk, and when you're on a computer having a conversation, maybe that person's muted themselves, and you're not getting body language and stuff. So how do you help or assist somebody who may be feeling that this is a tough time as a leader, or a tough time as as a worker, where you don't feel that you're getting the full attention of that person you're speaking with?
Well, it's a tough situation. It's going to vary from individual to individual, but as we've talked about today, technology allows you to connect anytime, anywhere with anyone in the world. And I just think you over communicate, and our staff knows that I'm guilty of that. I try to involve them in all decisions and all big decisions, not just in the area where they work, but all big decisions that affect us as an organization. I think someone mentioned it, I believe it was Laurie, don't forget to get on the phone and talk to people. I'm old school about that. I think that's a skill that we don't take advantage of often enough, and it's impactful, it's important, and I just think communication right now is really the big key when you're not with people on a regular basis or around them or have access to them directly. Use the technology that you have available to you. Let them know what you're doing, and it's important that right now you take advantage of this situation. All of a sudden you've got workplace flexibility. I think that's very important to take advantage of that freedom in your environment.
Some other questions have come through, and please make sure to send us your comments and questions and suggestions. And this question, I guess we'll stick with you, Doug, but if anybody on our panel feels that they'd like to jump in on this one, please do. Question comes in and talking about how do you demonstrate to your supervisor or colleagues like what you're working on? I know we've talked about over communicating, but what are some good ideas for check-ins? I think Lori may have said this before, and Doug, I know you said this as well, and even Barb. Let them know when you finish the task. But what if it's something that is it just sending out at 5 o'clock, hey, here's my work log, or hey, check the back end of the website. You can see that we've posted X amount of stories, or check social media.
Well, I think you look at that somewhat in the same way you do it when you're working directly with people. You show your work. You talk about your work. You just do it in a different fashion. You may do it by sending them a report or an update. Our staff is great about doing that. We send out documents to each other. We share information, and it's the simple concept that we've said several times today: over communicate, keep people informed, let them know what you're doing. If you're doing something new and creative, make them aware of that. Keep them updated on what you're doing. Lori?
Yeah, I was just going to add that a tactic that we've learned to use on our staff is if we're in the middle of a meaty project, something that we really don't need distraction, we just need to get our head down and do it. We'll tell each other, checking off Slack, not going to get your Slack messages, not going to participate in discussion because I'm off the grid for a little bit. I'm doing Academic All America something. So if you think that there's a chunk of time that you need that to get something crossed off your to-do list, or just a project that you're sinking your teeth into because you've got the time to do it now, make sure that your coworkers know, I'm not checking email, I'm not checking instant messaging, I'm head down doing this project. Doug, Nick?
Yeah, I think another question into that, Lori, and please stay with us for this one, is, how do you think people are feeling when that situation happens, when it is, okay, grind time and that green light's not on? Do you think there's some people that might be feeling judged, or maybe overly evaluated by their supervisor because, oh, hey, he didn't respond to an email that was sent out 20 minutes ago, or, there's a project that this individual is working on that we haven't heard from him? Is that something that people should feel a little bit concerned and worried about? Or, especially in this time, let people do what they need to do. They'll get it done. Obviously we're not in a world right now where, news needs to hit every 5 seconds.
Yeah, I feel like it's our own personal nature to feel judged about things like that. I think it's hard to not get that sense every once in a while. When my kids were little and I was working at the NCAA, I had to leave work every day at 5 o'clock to get to the daycare where they were because they closed up shop at 5:30. And if you know anything about the people that work at the NCAA, they are, there are people there till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, whatever. Well, they didn't have my life situation, but when I walked out that door, I felt like 100 sets of eyes on my back thinking, why is she leaving so early? It's only 5 o'clock. And I learned that nobody cares what my situation is. They're all thinking about their own situation. So I had no need to feel judged. Ultimately, your work and the quality of it is what is going to resonate with your supervisor. And I'll just go back to what Doug said. There has to be trust, and if you don't have trust between you and your supervisor for that person to know that you're going to get your work done, you're going to do it well and at a high level, then your problems are much deeper than being judged because you don't respond right away to a Slack message or an email or a phone call. Doug?
And I think as a supervisor, you've got to set the tone, what your expectations are. I think that's really critical to let people that work for you understand what the expectations are, what the delivery should be, and make them comfortable. As Lori said, I go back to it constantly, trust and accountability. You've got to relax in this atmosphere. Understand that we don't want to add stress to everybody's plate. There's enough stress out there right now in this upside down world. And so as statistics indicate, people can be more productive in this environment if you give them a respect and you give them trust and turn them loose, and then just judge them by the work they produce. It's pretty simple. Nick?
Sorry about that. Thought I might have lost you guys for a second. Yeah, I think like exactly like what you said. I think, and Lori, to your point, everyone's going to feel a little bit judged no matter what, because there's no actual physical daily interaction with your supervisor or your coworkers where you can actually talk about things that are happening. One of the things I think is from I guess my side of this whole thing as being an SID is making sure that you are communicating with your coaches, so that when your coaches are having meetings with their administrator, they can say, oh, I spoke with my SID, we have a plan, or I've spoken with some of my student athletes. So I think that whole thing will definitely help in the long run. I think some of the other things we as a group need to do is make sure that we are still in communication with everyone. I think from what I'm doing at George Washington, we're constantly having staff meetings, we're having FaceTimes every at 10:15 every day. So that's one of the important things to do, and to stay relevant with not only your staff but your supervisor. I know my supervisor says, hey, my phone's on, if you need me, shoot me a text or call. And to be honest with you, I talked with him before our webinar to ask him a couple of the questions, and some of the top that everything that is talked about was actually resonating with him, and got some of his input as well.
Well, I think it's a matter of, in this whole situation that we're talking about, working remotely, I think it's a matter of establishing a rhythm in your workday. All these issues are going to be different. They're going to be the same, and they're going to vary according to individuals. But establish a rhythm to your day and try to keep with it, and try to feel a level of comfort. And remember that, as we've said often, this is temporary.
All right, well, as we've hit the hour mark, I want to thank everyone for joining us, our panelists from the CoSIDA staff, and we'd like to once again thank you for joining our information session today. We thank all our staff members for their ideas and programming to assist our members in these difficult times. A reminder that you can find this on-demand webinar on CoSIDA.com and CoSIDA Connect, our membership portal, later this afternoon. It'll also be in a podcast format, so you can listen to it on your YouTube channel. We'll have more links on the CoSIDA website. Thanks for joining us today, and when we look forward to for you to attend all of our professional development webinars. So please take a look at the screen. I think there's a screen right there about some of the upcoming ones in the next couple of weeks, talking about creative content, our NTA, NAIA stats and record keeping, crisis communications from our NAIA friends. That salary survey will come out on April 16th. And then we'll have an ADA compliance webinar on April 24th. So stay healthy, everyone, and thanks once again for joining, and we'll talk to you again next time.